Hey Fromily, it's Julie B. Deep Dives, and today I'm diving into Season 3, Episode 5 of From, The Light of Day. We're officially at the halfway point of Season 5, and we've already had 2 explosive nighttime events with the monsters, 3 deaths, including the beloved Tien Chen, some mind-blowing reveals, and of course, more questions. This episode featured Boyd struggling to keep the town safe in the aftermath of Tabitha's dramatic arrival back in town, holding a town meeting that fans have been screaming for since the start, a shocking death via farway tree at the end, and much more in between. Please leave a like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. Now let's talk about Randall. For the first time, a character other than Boyd has survived a close encounter with the monsters. But why is this? Ever since he arrived, Randall has been an instigator, a troublemaker, but he's been on a redemption arc and turned into quite a hero in episode 4, running out of the bus with Boyd to help when the ambulance arrived at night, then running off to get tools from the bus to free Tabitha from that ambulance, putting himself in immense danger as a result. But Boyd was forced into an impossible choice by the monsters. He had to choose between saving this ambulance with 3 people in it versus saving Randall alone. Instead of killing Randall, though, the monsters dumped him outside Colony House on the hood of the ambulance. They clearly didn't want to kill him, just force Boyd into that predicament and injure Randall just enough to make him an even bigger thorn in Boyd's side than he already was. So not only is it a psychological game with Boyd, forcing this military veteran to leave a man behind, but now Randall will probably make even more trouble for him. As Randall lays on the Colony House couch, he starts freaking out and Boyd has to hold him down. Then we're shown this jarring point-of-view shot from Boyd's perspective, looking down at Randall as Randall says, "You did this. You left me." Kenny later asks Boyd why the monsters kept him alive, and Boyd responds with his guess, "I think they want us to look at him when the sun's up. They want us to remember what's coming at night. Part of the thing that keeps people sane here is to get to pretend during the daytime, pretend that we're safe. But with Randall walking around, we don't get to pretend anymore." So once again, the evil entity controlling the monsters is playing mind games with them, increasing the pressure and stress more and more. In a way, Jim was right when he said in Season 2 that it seems like someone is running an experiment to see how much stress they can take before they break down. I don't think it's literally an experiment, but the underlying principle is definitely true. Ever since Boyd found the talismans, the residents have been able to live again, not just survive. During the day, they compartmentalize their terror. They embrace the illusion of safety. But Kenny once said, that was only an illusion. They were never safe. The talismans were just a band-aid. Now the stakes have been raised this season. Conditions continue to get more dire, and Randall will be a living, breathing reminder every day now that they aren't safe at all. This dials up the psychological warfare going on in this town. And I just want to note, look how Randall was put on display by the monsters, laying him on the hood of the ambulance with the lights on, gaping wound on his cheek. It fits with the way they put deceased victims on display after killing them, just like they did with Tom, going to the trouble of pulling him out from under the Matthews house to put his body on display where people could see it. It's all part of their brand of terrorism, adding to the climate of fear and dread. And by the end of this episode, their latest victim will be put on display in the most unique way yet, but more on that later. In the aftermath of episode 4, the town is still processing the mind-blowing fact that Tabitha got out and is now back. Boyd delivers this news to Kenny and Jade when they bring the injured Christy to the clinic and leave her with Marielle. Now, Marielle doesn't seem to have after effects from the cicada coma like Randall and Julie do, but there must be something wrong that we have yet to see. She mentions that she is afraid Christy might suspect she's going to start spiraling and stealing morphine again due to her guilt over not being able to save Nikki the night before. It's possible that she's actually doing that already, and it's suppressing the cicada after effects that Julie and Randall are experiencing. So that's something to keep in the back of our minds. Now, when Jade finds out the big news about Tabitha, his reaction is to run straight to her and ask her to show him the tree so he can examine the bottles. He thinks a town meeting will be pointless, and he does turn out to be right about that. He asks if it's the same lighthouse that Miranda was looking for, and Tabitha says it has to be. But does it? I'm not so sure. All we know is that Victor's mom told him, and Eloise, she was going to the tower to save the children. How do we know it was the lighthouse tower that Tabitha went to? That could have been just part of her journey to get to another tower. Maybe if Tabitha had been able to reach the original bottle tree in Camden, where Henry was taking her, maybe that tree could have taken her to the correct tower. I mean, the timing seems awfully uncanny of this car accident. It was a 30 to 40-minute drive from Henry's house, and they were just down the road from the original bottle tree when a car hit them. They wound up in an ambulance, and both of them landed in Fromville. It seems as though some Fromville entity reached out and caused the accident, maybe by manifesting a vision to cause the other driver to get distracted. If the original bottle tree is a farway tree, then it might only work for chosen ones like Miranda and now Tabitha. Just food for thought. Jim tells us through exposition that he's already been to that tree, that bottle tree. It was the first place he looked, actually, when Tabitha was missing, and he took down a few bottles, and there were slips of paper inside. But he wasn't thinking on Jade's level and didn't consider that this might be important. He does make a good point, though, when he says, I think this place does a pretty good job of messing with our heads. However, Jade is convinced this is different. It has to be, he says. He points out that, of course, this place is messing with their heads nonstop. But he says that when Tabitha went home, that's not a trick. It's not a dream. That's real. And there's a whole town full of people that's going to be banging down your door demanding answers whether you have them or not, he says. Once again, notice this theme of dreams versus reality brought into the dialogue. Jade is acknowledging that this place plays psychological games with them, like Jim says, including all kinds of dream states, as he well knows. But he believes that Tabitha's escape was not a trick, not a dream. It was real. I believe he's right, and she did get out for real. Jade provides comic relief for this show, but he's also the smartest person here, and when he talks, we should be paying close attention. Also, he did correctly predict that the town meeting would be a waste of time, as we'll see. It's a great idea in theory for everyone to come together and share all of their unique, bizarre experiences here, because they all have different pieces to this overall puzzle that might actually start to fit together if they share them with the entire town. But this place does an excellent job of messing with people's heads, making them disoriented, clouding their judgment, and driving them to their breaking points. And none of this is conducive to logical thought or problem solving as a large group. That's why we're lucky that we even get these information silos on the show, pairs of people who are sharing information, such as Victor and Ethan in Season 1, Jade and Tabitha in Season 2, and now in Season 3, and more in this episode that I'll get into. Now, about this extremely unproductive town meeting. Fans have been waiting for this since the series began. For the first time, we see the sharing of key information with everyone in town. Everyone is told about the farway trees and how Tabitha escaped by being pushed out of a lighthouse. Unfortunately, from start to finish, the meeting is nothing but hysteria, accusations, and outrage. They aren't working together to figure out what happened, what all of it means, or what their next move should logically be. There's no logic to this meeting at all, just flaring tempers. Even Tilly, who is normally calm and peaceful, adds to the rising tension. And then Tabitha and Jim arrive, and everyone gangs up on them. She confirms that she went through a tree and got pushed out of a lighthouse, made it back to the real world, but didn't let the police or anyone know they were there, because she knew that they wouldn't have believed her. Henry and Acosta vouch for her on this, but the meeting keeps spiraling out of control as everyone attacks Tabitha for not doing more to try to get help for them, and not coming back with any answers or anything of assistance that we know of as of now. Fatima, in particular, behaves very much out of character, yelling and contributing to the chaos. Her persona has become strikingly dark, starting in Season 2, and I believe it's because an evil entity is using her as a vessel, which we think is a pregnancy. Elsewhere in this episode, Julie goes to get some marijuana at Colony House and looks out the window upstairs. Then we get a flashback of Fatima showing her that view of the nighttime landscape in Season 1, Episode 2, telling her, "I wanted you to see that if you climb up high enough, even a nightmare can look like a dream." I think the purpose of this flashback, a rare thing on this show, is twofold. First, to draw our attention to this memorable quote, invoking the omnipresent theme of dreams and nightmares, and the way our perception can determine which is which. The theme of appearance versus reality is also central to this show. Looking out at that beauty, we get the illusion that everything is normal and it's just a pleasant dream. But the reality is that down below them, the nightmare creatures are on the prowl. The other purpose of this flashback is to draw a stark contrast to Fatima's demeanor now, altered by the entity inside her. She used to be a ray of light in this dark place, with an incredible aura of positivity, but that's gone now. We can't just chalk it up to pregnancy hormones anymore. That doesn't lead a woman to eat rotten vegetables and drink blood, as she did in Episode 4. Now, getting back to the meeting, Boyd says the most important part of all this, the thing we cannot lose sight of, is this. Tabitha got out. Someone got home. It's not just hoping and wishing anymore. We've got concrete proof it's possible. Which is true, by the way. But if anything, the fact that she was brought back in against her will after only 5 days on the outside makes permanent escape seem more hopeless to me. Now, my friend Enzo from Vigaford Entertainment pointed out that Boyd's statement about concrete proof is actually some eerie foreshadowing for the ending of this episode, involving Dale and literal concrete. But more on that later. Everyone is on the verge of turning into an angry mob here. No one is doing any critical thinking, just ruled by their emotions. Bacta even says, "What is there to think about? Tabitha went through the tree and got home, right? Why aren't we all lining up to do the same?" Boyd tries to tell them it's not that simple. We can't just run out there to the forest and just hop into the first tree that we see. But his message is not getting through. He actually shares more information than he had previously done with the entire town, at least not on screen. He shares how he went through a tree himself, and he tells them, "You're all assuming that this tree is some kind of magic door. It's not. I went through one of those trees, and you know where I ended up? In a chimney underground. Damn near killed myself." Characters keep using this word magic to describe the trees, and it's making me think that maybe it's really not magic then. More likely to be some kind of teleportation device. This show is supposed to be both horror and sci-fi, after all. Dale says he's had it with Boyd's plans and rules, declaring he's going to the lighthouse and wants to go home. Now, just after the meeting, Boyd confronts Ellis, telling him, "We are sitting on a powder keg in there, and you and Fatima are lighting matches." Ellis responds that they need someone to do something and start taking chances instead of sitting around and worrying about what could go wrong. And this could not be more hypocritical. When Boyd wanted to try to catch a monster, Ellis told Donna, and they both tried to talk him out of it in Episode 3. Clearly, Boyd isn't just sitting around doing nothing. Boyd asks Ellis whose life he wants to risk. Pointing at the townspeople, he says, "Who's next? Who's your pick?" He points out that what happened in there is a dangerous thing, and he's proven right by the end of this episode. Desperation and mob mentality are indeed a dangerous thing. And later on the bus, Boyd is feeling guilty for leaving Randall, and Bacta says what happened last night wasn't his fault. She apologizes for not being supportive at the meeting. She says that he reminds her of her sister. Bacta says she was someone who tried so hard to make everything right, and she always ended up feeling like she was wrong. "You're trying to keep people from doing something stupid. I just want you to know I'll have your back next time." This is the second time Bacta has mentioned a family member, and as a minor character, it's strange that her family keeps popping up in her dialogue. First, she said her grandmother taught her the cicada nursery rhyme in Season 2, which no one outside of Fromville should have known. And now she's talking about how her sister was just like Boyd. I'm starting to think her family had strong ties to this place. At the very least, her grandmother entered Fromville in a dream, or had a vision, or heard a voice that recited that nursery rhyme. In another fantastic Boyd scene from this episode, Acosta acknowledges that she can't take back what she did, but thinks she can help. She suggests that the residents need something to focus on besides the tree, like a project to make them feel like they have some kind of control, which is actually good advice, but Boyd is understandably still angry at her for her conduct the night before. He says, "You've been here less than a day, and you already think you have the solution." Actually, though, this is ironic coming from him, because we saw in the flashback of his arrival in town that he did the same thing on the day after his arrival. He flew into action and completely took over. All Acosta was doing is just suggesting something. But Boyd rightfully calls her out for killing someone and abandoning someone handcuffed to the ambulance, saying the fantastic line, "Try not to kill anyone, and you let me worry about how to take care of my goddamn town." I predict there will be lots more tension between them. Boyd, this self-appointed sheriff, and this actual cop, Acosta. Something else I just want to point out. The recurring theme of dreams versus reality comes up multiple times in this episode. First, we had the Fatima flashback with Julie. Even a nightmare can look like a dream. But also, Tabitha tells her family, "It was scary waking up in the hospital not knowing if it was real or if I was still dreaming." This line seems designed to make us question if her experience was even real, or if it was a level 2 of Fromville, a simulation or a shared dream state. This show is playing mind games with us, exactly the way it does with the residents. But I still believe she was really out. Also, there's a recurring theme of grandmothers in this show that might be designed to make us focus on family trees. I believe certain people have ancestral ties to past town residents. Julie had said in season 1 that the first thing she'd do if she got out would be to call her grandma, and now she asks her mom if she called her when she got out, which she did. Elgin had been on the way to visit his grandma when he arrived. Tilly said she has 4 kids and 7 grandkids. And again, Baccha's grandma somehow knew the cicada nursery rhyme in season 2, and we learned that she had taught it to her. Now, speaking of family ties, Victor's father Henry is getting acquainted with this place. When Donna tells Victor his father is here, Victor has a strange reaction. He says, "That's not possible," and runs off. We find out why in a bit, but in the meantime, Donna shows him Victor's room. He says he had given up hope that any of his family was alive and feels guilty for that. Henry says for the first few years, every time I would turn a corner, there'd be a little spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd see all of them. Miranda, Eloise, Victor. That was the hardest part. That little bit of hope, that was the part I couldn't bear. He said that as the years went by, it became easier to just tell himself that they were dead, they were gone. And he's beating himself up on giving up on his family. Here we have 2 recurring themes. The importance of protecting family, for one. Remember that Boyd once memorably told Frank, "A man protects his family," after Frank got drunk and came home to find his wife and his daughter murdered by the monsters. The other recurring theme here is hope actually causing suffering. Henry says that little bit of hope was actually the part he couldn't bear, imagining he would see his family around the next corner, but it never came true. For him, it was easier to just tell himself there was no hope, except they were all gone, and therefore there would be no disappointment. This ties into a quote from the Abby entity that spoke to Boyd in the season 2 finale. Referring to the mysterious big bad entity, she said, "It knows you won't listen. It wants you to fight. It wants you to have hope that you could actually win. Hope is what makes you willing to suffer. It's not your fear that feeds the forest, Boyd. It's hope." I believe these Abbey apparitions are part of the evil entity, but there may be some truth to this. Hope is what drives them to search for a way out and causes them to suffer when their efforts fail. And for Henry, the hope that he'd miraculously see his entire missing family again caused him to suffer when it never happened for him. Now, speaking of false hope, this episode makes it clear that our hopes for a logical, productive town meeting may be in vain, as the meeting was on the verge of turning into a mob with pitchforks. But at least we continue to see these information silos, which are small groups or pairs of people who share vital information with each other, but leaving everyone else in the dark. In Season 2, Victor shared information with Tabitha, and now his confidant is Sarah. He had been planning to go into the caves with Sarah to look for Jasper the dummy, but now he says, "We need supplies. We can't go into the tunnels unless we have supplies, so that we don't get lost." Well, when they get to Colony House, he loses all motivation to go looking for Jasper when Donna tells him that his dad is here. Interestingly, his response is, "That's not possible," and runs off. And as Tabitha follows him, Victor says she should go home and we'll get Jasper later. Now, whenever anyone asked him how he arrived here, he would always shut down and say, "I don't want to talk about that," which is a classic trauma response. Many of us in the fandom surmised that his father may have been abusive and his mother ran off with him and Eloise, because he never mentions his father. But once we met Henry this season, he's always struck me as a good and kind human being who's suffered immensely from the disappearance of his family. So I became convinced that Victor shut down like that and never spoke of his father because of the sheer trauma of ending up in this place, ripped away from his father at a young age. Victor tells Sarah, "I never drew pictures of him when I was alone here. I always drew pictures of things that I saw because I knew pictures would remember. But I never drew pictures of what came before, and I told myself that was a dream, and that he was," and he doesn't finish the sentence. But I would guess he was going to say, he told himself that his father was not real. Once again, here is the theme of dreams versus reality. As a child trapped in this nightmarish place, it was easier to imagine that his real life before Frumville and his father were just a dream. That made it easier to let it go. Once again, that theme of dreams versus reality keeps coming back. My theory is that Frumville is a kind of mirror world, a pocket universe that mirrors our own, and is a bit like Lovecraft's Dreamlands, a physical place, another dimension that you could visit in a dream or fully awake. Thus, it's as if Victor has been living in a dream world here, and his perception has been backward, just like the reflection in a mirror. In order to cope, his mind convinced itself that the reality of his life before this, including his father, was just a dream. That's why he never drew pictures of his father, a real person. Instead, he drew horrifying pictures of things in this sort of nightmare realm that he's been living in, which had become his reality and his new normal. This is why he told Donna that's not possible regarding his father being there. He's seen all kinds of seemingly impossible things in this place, in all kinds of visions, and none of it surprises him anymore. But the presence of his real father is what seems impossible to him. Victor tells Sarah he's afraid to let his father see him like this, implying he knows he's not a normal adult. She responds that, "I don't know you that well, but you seem like a really good person, and that's something to be proud of here. I would give anything to feel like a good person again." Now, this may be a bit of foreshadowing for Sarah. After killing Toby, causing the death of Kenny's father and a caretaker, trying to kill Ethan, and accidentally killing her brother, Sarah has been on a redemption arc. But in my opinion, the only way for her to truly be redeemed for all she's done is to die heroically saving someone. And this line she stated could foreshadow that she'll make the ultimate sacrifice to be a good person again, giving up her life. A much more obvious bit of foreshadowing happens here when Henry meets Ethan and they walk past the motel sign. Henry wonders something we fans have pondered since the beginning. He says, "There's a motel sign here. There's a pool. Where's the motel?" The writing of this show is starting to reflect the way the fans are talking about it, from fan theories to now questions like this one. Also in this episode, Fatima called where they came from the real world, like we fans do, which I've always thought is interesting wording because it implies that Fromville is somehow unreal. And now Fatima literally said, the real world. See, word choice matters in this show. This doesn't mean that they're all literally asleep and in a coma or plugged into a simulation. I see this wording, the real world, as a hint that Fromville, by contrast, is brimming with illusions, unreal visions and voices that target specific people, so it's difficult to tell what's real and what's not. Anyway, getting back to this, Ethan says to Henry, "Thanks for bringing her back," meaning his mom. Henry responds, "I didn't. You're welcome." I've always paid close attention to Ethan's dialogue, and there may be more truth to what he said than it seems. I think Henry was the reason Tabitha was sent out, and he was the main target to be brought here at that time. And with Victor's lunchbox in the car as an anchor of sorts, it brought Tabitha right back with him. I believe in the theory that certain personal possessions can be like anchors or port keys. These relics serve as connections between our world and Fromville. If taken through a portal, whether it's a farway tree or the lighthouse portal to the outside world, these relics can guide a character to a location that's also tied to that item. And it can work in reverse as well, drawing Henry and Tabitha back because they had the lunchbox with them. I don't think Henry was a chosen one to be here, so he needed that anchor to help draw him in. Meanwhile, Sarah offers to accompany Victor to Colony House to meet Henry, but they run into Henry and Ethan on the way, leading to a deeply emotional reunion. As his father embraces him, Victor utters the heartbreaking line, "I didn't know how to get home." And there's the striking image of this grown man towering over his father, but still just a lost little child inside. It's every child's worst nightmare, being lost and not knowing the way home to your family. Elsewhere in the episode, aside from Victor and Sarah, here's another information silo, Julie and Elgin, sharing information just between the two of them. He tells her about the kimono lady visions, the latest one happening when he was awake, and how he originally thought she wanted to hurt him, but this time she was asking for help, and he doesn't know why. Elgin says his grandma would have told him it's an angel, another reference to grandmothers in the show. He said that she'd say, "There's a reason why angels fear not when they saw someone. Even Gabriel was terrifying." In turn, Julie shares some of the after effects she's experiencing from the cicada coma. She had already told Sarah that this place has gotten in her head, and she's scared of what that might mean, and she's afraid of hurting people like Sarah did. She also had told Ethan that she doesn't remember much from that coma-like state, but she just felt more scared than she had ever been in her life. So no one has gotten the whole story from her, but we get it in pieces from yet another pairing of her with Elgin, as she says, "I'd take the creepy kimono lady any day over the shit that's in my head now, mostly screaming. But I don't just hear it. It's like I can feel it too." She says that marijuana is the only thing that makes it quiet. This is interesting because we've gotten a hint that dropping acid, by contrast, can make certain people more in tune with Fromville visions. Miranda had visions that gave her immense knowledge of Fromville before she was ever there when she dropped acid. And then she painted all the things in this basement, in Henry's house. Now we hear from Julie that marijuana seems to have the opposite effect, calming down a deep connection with this place. Julie says that she didn't tell her parents about it, of course. At least she's telling someone, but not the people who should know about it most of all. In an interesting quote, she says she doesn't think her mom getting out means anything, and goes on to say, "I think this whole place exists just to make us suffer. Maybe that's why it let her out. That's what would make us suffer, is to give us hope. I don't think it's ever going to let us go." This is the second time in the same episode that a character has associated hope with suffering. First Henry and now Julie. Both of them were referring to living in hopeless situations, so to feel a modicum of hope just leads to suffering when that hope doesn't come to fruition. The hope of Henry to see his whole family again, in the hope of Julie and the other residents to escape this place. And we can't discount the possibility that Julie might be right. It's possible that Tabitha was sent out and brought back in so quickly just to make us suffer, just to make them suffer and give them false hope. Now, fake Abby, remember, said to Boyd, "Hope is what makes you willing to suffer." She was trying to trick him into not smashing the music box, but there may have been a kernel in what she said, a kernel of truth. Now here, in what seems like a throwaway filler scene at the moment, but might have significance later on, Julie and Elgin go into the Colony House basement where Elgin says this is where they keep all this weird stuff from the past. They go through a box of 80s clothes, which suggests there were people living here in the 80s who died off while Victor survived. And interestingly, they find this Polaroid camera and take pictures with it. This is likely the camera that was used to take the picture of Christopher that Jade found in his book of symbols in season 2. I suspect we might later see them take a picture in which the kimono lady will appear in the background, which would fit with a common horror trope. From there, after Victor and Sarah, then Julie and Elgin, we get another information silo, Ellis and Fatima. Ellis catches Fatima with the rotten vegetables, and she actually admits that the rotten food is all she can keep down, and she thinks there's something wrong with the baby. So we have people sharing information, but once again, I doubt that they're going to share this with a lot of other people. Now, here's another information silo, probably the most crucial one of all, Tabitha and Jade. She decides to go to the bottle tree with Jade. Jim had pushed back on the idea, noting that they thought that she was dead and she just got back. Ethan even wants to go too, and Jim says, "Do you really want to take him out there and show him where the magic tree is?" Once again, word choice matters. People keep referring to this thing as the magic tree in this episode. Fans have hotly debated if the show involves magic or science fiction. The fact that they keep calling this a magic tree suggests to me that it's maybe not magical, but again, more of a portal or a wormhole. Anyway, once they're at the tree, Jade takes a bunch of bottles down and they look at the papers that were inside, apparently able to take them out without breaking the bottles like Boyd did in season 1 with one bottle. I've theorized before that there are spirits attached to these bottles, or trapped inside of them. Since Sarah has medium-like powers and freaked out when Boyd was poking them with a stick in season 1, screaming, "I hear them." And while she screamed this, the camera panned up jarringly toward the bottles. So Sarah was hearing more than one voice in her head, probably all the spirits connected to the bottles, screaming at the same time, and later on, she relayed the message of a female voice to Boyd. So it looks like this season we may be able to settle the question as to whether removing the papers from the bottles could release evil spirits or entities. If disturbing the bottles causes them to be released, there should be many entities released now. Unlike Boyd, though, it appears that they didn't break the bottles. They look like they're intact here. I don't see any broken, and I suspect that it's the act of breaking the bottles that could release evil spirits. Somehow, they seem to have gotten the papers out without breaking them. At the very least, I think there are spirits connected to the bottles, maybe some evil spirits, and just some spirits of the deceased as well who are trapped here. Now, Jade says exactly what fans have suspected since Boyd broke open a bottle in season 1. Every slip of paper has 4 numbers on it. What if they're dates? But then Tabitha shows him one that says 2659, which would seem to undermine that idea, and Jade seems to change his mind. If they are in fact dates, this would imply that there is some kind of extreme time travel involved in this show, even more dramatic than some fans have theorized about. I suspect that the numbers could mean something else, though. Possibly address numbers, geographical coordinates of some kind, or more likely, they could represent a month, day, and year. So 2, 659 could be February 6th, 1959. Now, Tabitha sounds like she's leaning towards Jim's sentiment that this place is just messing with their heads at this point. But then Jade tells her that he saw her Ankui kids in the tunnels, and he says it turns out it wasn't a symbol, it was a hole in the ceiling, and these slashes were roots. And those kids, they were laid out on slabs of stone, repeating that word over and over again, he says. It's fantastic to see Jade finally telling someone about this memorable vision from the Season 2 finale. Boyd had asked what had happened to him back in Episode 1, and he wouldn't share anything. Unfortunately here, it's still an information silo of just Jade and Tabitha, but it's still great to see some communication happening regardless. They made a great team in Season 2, and it looks like they'll continue to put their heads together now. Jade tells Tabitha, I felt fear in that moment like I've never felt in my life, but there was also this glimpse of something that I knew was there, but I couldn't. Even with all the horror, it was like for the first time I felt there were threads that were finally starting to connect. This choice of words is interesting. Threads that were finally starting to connect. Kenny related something his mom always said back in Season 2. It's hard to see the sweater when you're only just a thread. Meaning that it's difficult to see the whole picture when you're in the middle of something. Just like the expression, you can't see the forest for the trees, which was actually even a title of an episode in Season 2, Forest for the Trees. When Jade returned from the cave in Episode 1, he fashioned the bar with this enormous amount of strings, or threads, and lay down under them, apparently trying to visualize these threads that he could see that were just starting to connect in his mind during that cave vision. It was a thought experiment, just like when he made the broken bottles into the symbol in Season 2. Jade lay down under this web of threads, getting drunk in the process, and it looked like he was losing his mind, but now we know he was just trying so hard to put together the threads of this mystery in his head that he was so close to connecting with during his vision. Jade goes on to say, piecing this together is like trying to grab hold of water. These numbers in these bottles, they might seem like this tree. There's no denying what this tree did. And the fact that someone took the time to put these bottles here, to put these numbers here, it only looks like chaos until you understand the pattern. This is a key insight. In fact, all of the insane things in this show might seem like chaos, but it only appears that way until you understand the pattern. This has been Jade's burden from the beginning, using his genius mind to try to decipher what all of his visions and everything else he's seen here means. And he's getting closer to figuring it out, but it's testing his sanity in the meantime. Also, it's interesting that he points out that someone took the time to put the bottles here with those numbers. Fans have always wondered how the bottles got there. Who put them there? It's possible, actually, that no one did. And in fact, they were manifested there, duplicated by Miranda's Bottle Tree art installation in Camden. I see Fromville as a mirror dimension, and items could be duplicated or manifested from what we call the real world, or our dimension, just like the bracelet that ended up in the diner storage room in Fromville, just like magic for Tabitha to find, and like the bottle trees in the woods. Remember, there are 2 bottle trees that we know of in Fromville. One is this farway tree that leads to the lighthouse, at least for Tabitha did, and the other bottle tree is the one that Boyd and Sarah visited. These could actually have been manifested here when Miranda made her 2 bottle trees back in the 70s. So it's possible that no one actually had to physically hang the bottles up in the tree. They might have just appeared there. Anyway, getting back to the episode, as Tabitha and Jade talk this out, Dale shows up and insists on going into the faraway tree, despite their warnings not to do it. Dale is not just being self-serving here. I believe him when he says he wants to go back home and also figure out how to get help for everybody back there. He's always wanted to help, but he's misunderstood due to his bad attitude. Back in Season 1, when the Colony House Massacre was about to start, Dale was telling someone that he could actually help if people would just listen to him. Some of his attitude probably came from frustration because people didn't take him seriously. And before getting in the tree, he says, "Somebody's got to try, right? It's okay. You guys can thank me later." Ironically, they will thank him later because now people will know it's not safe to all line up and jump in the tree. Then we cut to a bunch of townspeople running to the pool. Boyd joins them and they find Dale stuck in the wall of the pool, being crushed to death in the concrete, which was eerily foreshadowed once again when Boyd said earlier in the episode that they now have concrete proof that escape is possible. Victor once told Ethan that with faraway trees, the destination is random. You never know where you'll end up. You could wind up stuck in a mountain somewhere. Now we're seeing an outcome like this come to pass for the first time. Oddly, though, this was the faraway tree that Victor thought was supposed to only lead to the lighthouse, as he told Tabitha in season 2. His mother had said this tree was special and only goes to that location, but I've never believed it. I think Miranda believed it, but in reality, only certain ones like her, only certain chosen ones like her and Tabitha, could get to the lighthouse through that tree. And as for the other trees, I don't believe they're random. I believe that the evil entity or the big bad can control the destination of those trees. I'll get into that more in an upcoming video. Suffice it to say that Dale, the evil entity made an example out of him to deter others from trying to escape through the tree. Bacta had asked earlier in the episode why they shouldn't just all line up at the tree right now. So when Dale insisted on doing this, the evil entity put him on display right in the middle of town, trapped in the side of the pool, a grim visual warning of the dangers of the faraway trees, proving to everyone that escape is not as simple as just lining up at that tree and swan diving out of the lighthouse. It's reminiscent, once again, of the way monsters put people's bodies on display, and Randall was put on display on top of the ambulance. Boyd tells Dale, "I'm sorry this happened to you," and he's about to shoot him, but Dale dies on his own, crushed and trapped in the wall. After this, Boyd echoes his own line to Ellis from earlier in the episode, addressing the crowd. "Who's next? Still want to go to the tree? Go ahead then. I am trying to keep you alive. Don't you see that? I can't help you if you won't let me." In closing out the episode, Donna shows up and looks horrified. She'll surely take this hard, with another member of her Colony House family gone, even if it is Dale, who was a pain to just about everybody. Now, I want to know what you guys think. Who or what do you think controlled the faraway tree that sent Dale here and caused his death? What will happen with Randall going forward, and with Fatima and this so-called pregnancy of hers? And what do you think the numbers could mean in the bottles? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, keep on deep diving, and let's see what we can uncover together.